up to 8% by end. And part of what we see is the impact that this has on the purchasing power of the ordinary people, that people have less money to buy what they need to buy. Now, inflation in this country is driven by critical factors, the cost of food and the cost of fuel. Now, as long as those items remain expensive, as long as the prices of those items keep going up, inflation will be a factor, and the net impact is that people then buy less and less and less. And you know the ripple effect in terms of how it impacts corporate investment, how it impacts unemployment. Those are things that then we begin to see happening in this economy. So inflation is a really major factor that the current administration needs to address. And as far as what we can see is concerned, we see that it is going to remain a major challenge throughout this year. We've tried to track and say, how does food and fuel affect the core inflation? You can see how food prices, the impact of food has been rising, cost of food going up all the way, fuel going up all the way, and ultimately what then it does on the inflation to ordinary purchase of essential items that people require their day-to-day survival. If it comes to government consumption and investment, government is a major driver of an economy because of how much it buys, and also how much it is able to invest. What we have noticed is that if you look at the current account deficit, which is widening as we go forward, it tells you the kind of expenditure patterns that are happening with the government. Now, a lot of we see, for example, the depreciation of. There are a lot of imports that we bring in, and those imports are becoming more and more expensive because as the shilling depreciates, we have to pay more outside to get those imports in. And now, through the management of the current account, you will see that the payment to net imports is higher than what we export out. So that again has an impact on the management of that account and the impact that a government will have on what it is buying. If you look at capital account, which has foreign direct investment and remittances, we see that remittances from diaspora have remained almost. We now begin to see there's a slight increase even from the regional market. Regional countries within East Africa. We have seen that more money now is beginning to come from countries like Uganda coming in. But again, we see that there's not significant change in what has been happening in this area, which means that the capital account will not expand much to have reserves available to government to pay for its imports or ensure that enough is going into investments. Again, if you look at, of course, the balance of payments, which is a factor of the exchange rate, again, we know what has happened. The shilling has moved from 105 early in the year, 110 early in the year. Currently, we are about 140. That has had a significant impact on how we manage the balance of payments. Now, despite the fact that the government entered into an oil import arrangement on credit to try and preserve the exchange rate between the dollar and the shilling, that has not had impact. We haven't seen that reduce the price of the dollar against the shilling, which means that this trend is likely to continue. And if the shilling continues to depreciate, then of course we shall experience a significant balance of payment challenge. If you go to national debt, currently the national debt stands at 10.1 trillion. Again, that has an impact. We saw in the month of April, because of the increased payments, civil servant salaries had to be delayed because it was a choice between do you make that installment or pay salary. So they had to choose that to make that payment, because if the country defaults, a lot of other things will also be affected. And additionally, going forward, then it becomes very tricky for the country to continue getting funding from external sources. So the approach also, if you see generally from the monetary authorities, is to see that interest rates are continuing to go up. It means cost of debt is going to go up. This generally has an effect in terms of entities that are able to access credit. Now, if the government is going to go into the market to fund its operation through domestic borrowing, what that means is that it is going to crowd out private sector. So government takes most of the money, private sector has to fight for the little that is left. Now, that again becomes another challenge, because then private sector investments get affected. And so the impact of government in the money market is a significant factor, and is what we looked at in terms of how it impacts the overall performance of investments going forward. In terms of fiscal deficit, we understand where taxation is today. We understand about government expenditure. We see how the government is planning its expenditure and how it is planning to fund that expenditure. There's a lot of aggressiveness in terms of trying to ensure that as much taxes are collected as possible, with increases of VAT, levies provided to ensure that investments in housing are funded through increased taxes. So these measures that are being put in place to ensure that the government can meet its expenditure from its existing revenues, there's a significant deficit that is been recorded. That deficit is to the tune of 656 billion, which means how does then the government meet that deficit? It's going to meet that deficit by going into borrowing in the domestic market. Part of what we expect going forward is to see some discipline, what you would call austerity measures, exercised by government to ensure that its expenditure is properly controlled so that it's nearly matched by whatever it's collecting, to ensure that the deficit that arises out of its expenditure and income is reduced to a significant level, to a reasonable level, to ensure that government does not go into the domestic market and crowd out private sector in terms of access to credit. If you look at this chart, for example, in terms of total revenues, you will see on a year-to-year basis, total revenues and total expenditure. Total expenditure is always above the revenue that the government collects, and there's always a fiscal deficit that has been throughout. This deficit is then funded through external and domestic borrowing. And interestingly, as you look at the entire trend, right from 2021 all the way up to try to project what will happen up to 2027, see that there will always be a deficit. That deficit will be covered by borrowings in the domestic and external markets. And that will be a factor in terms of the government approach its fiscal management strategy. So, all that into account, we focus that the growth The nominal growth rate for 2023 is going to be 4.6%. That's the figure that all those factors that we have looked at generally boil down to. And if you see in terms of GDP evolution, because it's something we do on an annual basis, except that we did not come out in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, but it is something we have been doing in all the years. If you see how, let's go to them. How this has been happening right from 2003 up to 2023, which is our current forecast, and what we estimate to be the forecast for 2024 and 2025, it gives you a general trend of where our economic performance actually lies. If you understand the approach to this in terms of looking at the capacity that we have built as a country, which is the investments that we make both at private government level, and it gives you that this is the trend we expect to see in the next 3 years. So last year in 2022 grew at 4.8%. This year we see a drop from 4.8 to 4.6. Next year we're likely to see a slight increment, 5.1, but that will depend on certain things happening, which we shall keep you informed. And because our approach now is that every quarter we shall have tracking these factors and see the impact that they have, so that we give you a revised forecast on a quarterly basis. And that is information that everybody requires in the country as part of their decision-making process. So thank you very much for listening to me. Now it is time for you to give to the economics team. If you have any questions that you need answered, they are here now to respond to your questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cameron, the business day. A couple of questions. First, around your field on the monetary scheduling. You mentioned that you expect to see good demand for credit. Do you think that specifically its target of meeting it and putting that that's the second round effect of the inflation and now the for inflation around 4%. And so the goal for them is to bring it down by reducing demand. You feel that that will have the effect. Then my second question is around your expectations on the current account. Do you expect the deficit to widen significantly? This sort of different what the CBA is doing. You had a 4.8% in May, and they expect it to stick around that point on average for the year. So I'm curious to know why you have that different opinion for CBA. Thank you.
Want us to take a couple more, or do you want to take one question? Anybody else have a question?
Okay. For inflation, they have edged upwards by 4%. But what was happening with food inflation of the same? Look at the same CPI data. Food inflation was 10.something%, and fuel was 12.5%. So what you will see, if you break down the composition of inflation, core inflation is still something like 1.3, or represents a total of 1.3 percentage points, while food inflation is still 5.7%. Of the 7.9% annualized inflation, how much of it came from food? and how much we pay for fuel. So we see, I think that's what they can say. The primary drivers remain food and fuel. And the current, for example, effects of taxation measures that are current now will in fact push fuel higher. And as you have seen, the reason, their own explanation why, as inflation stayed at 7.9, it is primarily fuel. So we think that in fact, focusing on core, which is in the case the way monetary policy has been going, doesn't quite give you the effect that you want. On your second, so it is our expectation is a bit different, and I think their own data proves our case that will not make a lot of progress by focusing on core. You have to look at, and you know, the use of the word core is itself misleading. It's not that it is the primary driver. You know, when you say core, I think you're saying it is simply that all the other effects, all the other goods in the basket are placed in that category we call core. So the data proves, my view, what we are explaining to you. Trade deficit, will it widen? It's narrow. I think the effect of 1 month, we may not, you have to try and annualize. So you have to look at what happened January, February, all the way. So yes, there was a month where there was a bit of a narrowing of the trade deficit, but if you look at it from an annual point of view, we expect it to widen. Why? Because of the depreciation of the shilling. I mean, even where higher cost of fuel might slightly decrease domestic demand for Indian products, it is not significant. So if you look at it at an annual basis, the likelihood is for the trade deficit to widen. If you look at then on the capital account, we expect remittances to stay around muted. Why? Because if you look at where we get the remittances from, in North America and Europe, economic activity there is a bit constrained. So you can expect it will be muted. So the overall balance of payment may be a slight positive, but the trade deficit will have because of the effect. Any other? Yes.
Hello. Yeah, I wanted to get some it's from yourself. The government has done away with the direct importation of oil, and they were saying that it would be one of the factors that would bring the cost of going down. Saying that as compared to trading dollars. So we expect that how sustainable is that idea as an economist?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you. I mean, what government is trying to do is to arrange transactions such money. I think you all know as business importers, the way we have been importing fuel. In open tender, one fuel company is assigned then the role of importing, and then the rest of the oil companies take from that consignment depending on their market share. And that has continued. The question was how to pay. So what government did was negotiate so that instead of paying, they got a 6 months LC. Now, it did not quite have the intended effect because the bank that has to settle the LC has to start accumulating the dollars right away. Otherwise, where will they find them when 6 months are up and 6 months are up? So it did not quite bring down the demand for dollars, because the financial institutions that provided the LC have to accumulate the dollars in order to settle the LC with the time comes. It also didn't quite bring down. Although I don't really think the policy intent was to try and bring down the demand for dollars. On the price side, it may in fact increase the price because the LC itself is not free. There are financing charges there because you're talking about 6 months credit, and who then pays for 6 months credit? And unfortunately, you also had another effect, which is that the premium the importer gets, because each importer, when it is their turn, they get a small premium because of, if you can call it an arrangement fee. That premium seems to have gone up with the transaction. So the overall effect did not, I mean, so long as the financial institutions continue to provide a letter of credit, and I guess the costing of it is sorted out, they
just say one item is that because you're not paying the dollars today, you have time to pay. The idea was that then you buy time to organize your position. So that by the time you are now paying, then depending on how you have been managing the environment, 6 months, it becomes much easier. It was hoped that because of that delayed payment in dollars, it would have an impact on the agent itself. That cannot come straight away. It just takes a bit of time because oil is not the only item you are looking at. There are other factors that are also influencing the same. But you can believe that the delayed payment for the $500,000 that used to pay every month has given quite a breather that helped in management of the TG. And we hope that if with things being equal, that impact has helped quite a bit. Things would have been much different. But I think if this program then can be taken on, that other than the 6 months, you keep on having it rolling over, it means that you have gotten a credit for 6 months, which should roll over properly. It should be able to have a real impact on your activity.
Hello. Thank you, sir. So away from what when the Kenya Kwanza government came into power, the president was campaigning saying that Kenyans about I don't know how many millions have been listed under CRP. They said they're going to ensure that that comes on. So where does this leave? You also doing CRP, and that was your main thing. And then you also have the hustler fund, where it's more of you are not pushed to pay their own way.
Although I think your neighbor, Gideon, who is the CEO of the CRP side, will have to answer. But let's understand what CRP is. Credit reference bureaus. I know some of you are writing strange words like blacklist. There's no such thing. A credit score gives you the estimation of someone's credit, looking at many things together. Looking at when they borrow, they have not borrowed, and many other transactions. And it is the modern way of trying to assess credit quickly. It's a tool assessing credit quickly. And what we expect, of course, is for financial institutions to use it properly, because you can misuse it. They are not careful. It is not an either or. That are you listed or are you not listed? That is completely incorrect. And if you see anybody out there, if your bank is using it as an either or, maybe you have a hill because they don't know what they're doing. It's not an either or, it is an estimation of credit of the person. You can also think about it. That person works in, and you will find we provide credit rating for companies. That company itself works in a sector, and you will find you can buy an industry performance that tells you how that whole industry, how it is performing. If you aggregate it further, you will find that in fact that company works in a county somewhere. And you can come to us, we give you a county rating, and you see the number of counties. Oman, India, rating. And that gives you a certain measure of the creditworthiness of the credit of that county in which is economic activity is happening. And you can even aggregate it now to the sovereign. And yes, sovereign ratings, county ratings, company ratings, when they perform. So that's the environment. During COVID, obviously, meaning in what then government is to work that help people cure. And you don't have to always for when government is saying so. You as an individual, when you take your credit score, you actually can improve it by taking such an action. And we encourage you to do so. But look, I'm an economist, the CEO is there. Let him explain to you a bit further.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gideon Piakwa. I'm the CEO of Metropol here. Good morning. My name is Gideon Piakwa. I'm the CEO of Metropol here. I'm going to answer the two questions. The first question is the impact of the new government with respect to status of people in the CRP. So today, as we speak, we have over 20 million people whom we have their credit information in the Bureau. The right word is to not say listing, but we have their information. Now, from that information, we generate credit scores and we generate reports which are used by lenders to determine the interest rates. We are in this market today, we are in a risk-based pricing regime. So the cost of your credit, not just access, but the cost is affected by your credit score. So from that credit score, then you get favorable term if you have a good credit score or high interest rate. Now, the impact of the new regime was to roll out a policy around something called credit repair framework. So credit repair framework, which was lasting for 6 months, ended in 31st March. And you must have seen a banner at the back saying Hakikisha, if you got 50% discount. So the policy directive were on 3 fronts. The first, and our economist has alluded to it, is that government sometimes, like in the cases of COVID-19, and it was global, they take an approach to address fundamentals around the credit recording. And the fundamentals could be that negative listing or information that is negative is not used in credit scoring. So in the credit repair framework, individuals who had facilities that they had borrowed from digital or their mobile phones were zeroed to 0 days in arrears. So it was not in default listed. And lenders were asked to give their customers 50% discount. So those were the two things. That the negative listing on those mobile loans was removed. And secondly, people were given 50% discount. That's why you have a 50% Hakikisha loan. And the borrowers were given 6 months to clear out that facility, which was now under some moratorium. So that, from our data, 44% of Kenyans benefited and took advantage of the moratorium within the credit repair framework. So yes, there was an impact of the hustler government, the Kenya Kwanza government, on removing people from the negative listing because it directed lenders not to share the negative listing status for those accounts. Now, On the current Hustler Fund transactions, we're in negotiations with the ministry to have access to the information. So the Hustler Fund had intended purpose of creating an opportunity for those people who have not been able to be lent money by mainstream commercial banks and financial institutions to get money from a government fund. Now, once those people have gotten the money, they have built a good credit history. We're in negotiation with the Hustler Fund for that information to be brought to the CRB, to the Credit Information Reporting Framework, so that the individuals who are borrowing from the Hustler Fund can now benefit from real access of being in the mainstream credit market. So they are not restrained only to this government credit market. So they can borrow from now KCB, equity, ETB, even from the digital. So it has the benefit of serving themselves by getting that data coming to the field. Secondly, is the Hustler Fund already has enabled people to keep their credit for those who are paid. So even the people who had a bad credit score, who are already served, but they're defaulted, or they were in default status, by repaying Hustler Fund, they have improved the credit score. So that benefit needs to come to their credit profile in the credit market. So we are in negotiations with the Hustler Fund for those people come to the mainstream credit market without that benefit of positive engagement to translate into better terms for them. Now, thirdly, and which is not a secret, is that the Hustler Fund, for those people who have borrowed and are not paying, they are limiting the capacity of the Hustler Fund to be sustainable and to grow. What should happen to such people? Those people need to be sensitized and needs to be given greater sensitization around the value repaying and getting the money. So we have negotiations with them also to support them in terms of providing credit scores for them to understand this person we call serial defaulter. There are people who have gone to the Hustler Fund with the sole purpose borrowing and not to repay. Should such a person be enabled continuously have access with the intention of defaulting? The answer is no. And how can the Hustler Fund know who is this serial defaulter? Where will they get that information? It's from us here, because we have built credit histories for over the years. So we're in negotiations to support the government in terms of these key pillars: access, especially to the underserved; greater potential to those people who are already served but are having challenges but have had a chance to upgrade their credit scores; and then thirdly, create sustainability of the fund by enabling the benefit of the information asymmetry to weed out serial defaulters. Thank you very much.
Any other question? Any additional comments?
Yeah, my friend, you see, when government came into place, they kind of agreement. They said CRB was kind of monster. The borrowers has become a big lender. So they came in saying, you have really made people to suffer. Now, what happened? Because these guys were listed with CRB. When they were given a leeway by the government, say we have a fund which you can. You don't need to go. You don't need to go anybody. You just as long as you have your ID card, you go to the getting money. So then I said that I said borrower or whether this person is already has already been given a soft one. So he'll continue borrowing.
That's okay. The correct position was government was correct. Was saying to credit providers that the bureau is not a yes or no. And I really want to repeat that. somehow, really, it is not a yes or no. The score gives you something. It gives you a probability of performance. It's not a yes or no. And anybody can ask you performance. The question is, what is the likelihood of performance? Now, government is correct to insist on the banks that banks should use risk-based pricing. They should not just be, are you listed or not? That is a very boring question to ask because it's not even what the thing is intended for. So government was correct to say, around the world, credit preference bureaus are not a yes or no position. They give you certain data that you need to know how to use. That is why the central bank is approving for all lenders a risk-based pricing model. Then they were given a certain time by which they have to have developed those pricing models, and those pricing models are approved by the regulator. That's actually the actual position. And for you as a citizen, you should know that the financial sector reports when you have borrowed and also when you have not borrowed. That's why this you told you 20 million of us by the data. That's really the way it is. And you should encourage every conversation for people to use the CRP.
In a much simpler way, on those who are supported or practice. What was the idea on it? You don't have to learn whether you have paid the bill, pay or not, you'll be given a score. So even if you had reported, you don't measure how much you reported. The amount of gold and so on. What happens when you think about the score? Even that person who had reported will be given a score. The score will be on their own. That makes a bit difficult to get the money, but he has a score. Nobody is saying what you're saying. And what you're being encouraged is to try to see how you can improve your score so that you can get better terms when you go to the market. That's the idea. You're saying everybody has a chance to go and go. Even if you had reported, you get a score which will do a lower. But it does not stop you from being even money because lenders are being told, don't look at the data, look at what is the score of the person has. Even if someone with the lower score, that's where the president was coming, was saying that even the person who are defaulted, who are now that he has been given a score, that score should be able to guide the lender to determine what rate of interest can be given. And you cannot see the overall, you see that nobody then should be kept away from borrowing. What may differ is what rate of interest are you given depending on your score.
Thank you, Director Morigo. Thank you, the entire economics team, all members of the media, engaging deliberations. I now want to call this briefing to a close, but there will be an opportunity because I understand that there are some representatives from some meeting stations that are coming late. So you will have a chance to engage with the economics team. To the rest of us, I want to invite you for a cup of tea and share. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. No problem. Make it.
Disconnect now, people. Check, check.
Actually, that Metropol has very little industrial development, the energy reference. That's a nice question.